Boom, boom. Hey there, welcome to the stream. I hope you're having a great weekend. I certainly am. It's a nice, quiet Saturday. It's very cold outside and also in most of my house, but I have turned on the heating in this small studio, hoping that it will get a little bit warmer. I always get like really cold hands. That's how I know that I have to do something in terms of turn on the heating. I'm going to record the podcast. For those of you that are watching this for the first time, welcome. And let me know in the chat where you're from and how you are doing. And if you have been here before, you know the drill. I'm going to record this 1 hour podcast that I record every week. It's called The Break. It's about a whole slew of topics. This week we'll be talking, of course, about what's going on in the online world, Twitter, Mastodon, all that sort of stuff. I want to give you a review of a television series that I've discovered on a relatively new service here in the Netherlands, which is Sky Showtime, which, among other things, has Paramount stuff. I would like to explain a little bit about the Catholic faith, as I always do every week. And today I want to talk about, I think, a really great initiative that is going to launch in the podcast sphere early next year. We'll be talking about some books that I've read, The Big Bang Theory, NaNoWriMo, soy milk, and the Steam Deck. And as usual, I talk about a lot of other stuff that is just brought up or comes up spontaneously. Spontaneous. Is that a word? I don't even know. Hello. Hey, Mariana from Sweden. What is Mastodon? I'm gonna explain that in my show. You're still the only one watching, which is very cool. But more people will join us over time, especially, and I should do that right now, is when I post a link to my other socials, and people usually will drop in, and you won't feel that alone anymore. Let's see. Hey, there's a little preview window popping up on the other monitor. I'm using two monitors here. Let me go to my main YouTube channel. There we go. I can see it right there. Not now. And then we'll just share, I guess. Share the link, copy the link. All right. Now, I always have to think multiple times before I post something because I'm on so many different social platforms. I used to be very active on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram. I've got my Discord peeps, of course. That's usually where I start. So let me do that right now. There we go. That's number one. Then I go to Facebook usually. I still haven't found a good way to do all these things in an automated way. Oh boy, I remember now. I logged out of my Google account. So now I need to log in into all these platforms again. I always forget stuff like this. Okay, let's see if we can log into Facebook. Is that gonna work? Oh, and then of course I always have like extra security. Oh dear, oh dear. Well, the joys of online stuff. Where's my authenticator? Authenticator. Here it is. It's a bit of a hassle, but I prefer this over getting hacked. There you go. Let's see what happens. Does that work? Yep. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Patience. There we go. We're back in Facebook. Excellent. All right. Let's go to, oh yes. I actually really would like you to remember this password. Then I go to bloop. No. I want to go to my other profile. I'm slowly cleaning up all my social, like I've got way too many channels. And it becomes so hard to manage. And I'm in the process of cleaning stuff up, but I'm not there yet. Okay, so I'm on my profile page. Yes. Join me live on YouTube. There we go. Place that there. Okay. Very good. And then, of course, we've got Twitter. And I'm migrating the conversation. So with all the drama going on in the Twitterverse right now, I've moved part of my interaction to Mastodon, which is a new social, well, not new, but it's relatively new as a social media platform, and it's very enjoyable there. Okay. Wow. Let's see. Tweet. And then let's try something new and post this also on Mastodon. Join me live as I record my weekly podcast, The Break. All right, let's see what happens. Publish. Very well. Okay, Mastodon right now, because there's so many people discovering this new platform, it's very slow. It takes a long time for all these different servers to kind of communicate with me and with each other. But there you go, that's posted. Instagram I usually skip, because on Instagram you cannot post working links, which is very strange actually. So they really try to keep you within the app. So you can post a link, but it will just display as non-clickable text, which kind of defeats the purpose of posting a link. And then if all is well, I should be able to see all your comments. There you go. There you all are. So we've got Aaron, we've got Liz. Hopefully you're still doing well despite the COVID jab. Michiel should be fine food-wise, I understand, at least for the next week, for the coming week. Palomitas and Hugo, full screen film, is also there. Good afternoon. Rare Room Trading, hello there. Some new names, some old names. Yeah, I know. You can in Instagram, you can say, go to the link in the bio. Whoever does that, it's just like, okay, well, whatever. People will have to follow my updates elsewhere to get the notification. Hey, Sandy, long time no see. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's waste no more time. Put on my headphones here, because this is not the only thing I need to record today. I'm so far behind with my geeky stuff, like I need to record new Star Wars reviews of Andor. I need to record another episode of my anime hour that I do for my folks over on TikTok. Hopefully I'll still have energy at the end of this day. All right. Week 44. Let's go. Hey there, welcome to another episode of The Break. I'm Father Roderick, and I'm podcasting on a beautiful but very cold Saturday afternoon, early afternoon. It's so cold that I turned up the heating in some of the areas of my house, especially here in the office where I'm recording this show, because I don't want to have cold hands. This episode is made possible thanks to my wonderful community of patrons over at patreon.com/Father Roderick. I just want to say a quick hello to a few new patrons that have joined the community, Johan, Alexander, Claire, and I also want to welcome back Bartek, who is from Poland, and he's been a part of the Patreon community for a while, but I noticed that he renewed his subscription. So thank you so much for your support. If you would like to join those patrons, first of all, they would love it because it's a very vibrant community. It's a very welcoming community. We have a Discord server for the patrons. So it's a bit shielded, but that also makes it a really safe place to be, a nice place to hang on, to hang on to. It's not that bad, but to hang out. And it's also a place where I interact a lot with my supporters. But also you help me do this kind of work, to reach out via all these social media platforms, some of which have been around forever, but I've also recently dabbled in with posting on Mastodon, which we'll be talking about in a minute. And of course, we've got the TikTok and YouTube audiences, which are absolutely fantastic. Love that community. And it's very rare for priests to have the time and also maybe the creativity to make content for those platforms and to interact with the big audiences of young and not so young people there. And that's what you help make possible by your support. I'm totally dependent on my patrons, which is sometimes a bit scary because I have no other sources of income, but it's also incredible strength because it means that we're doing this together and your support helps me to help others. So hopefully you can join that community. Again, check it out at patreon.com/Father Roderick.
Do you know what's going on? This is what's happening in your world.
Face it, Catholics rule. We got Boston, South America, the good part of Ireland, and we're making serious inroads in Mozambique, baby.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
What a week it has been. It feels like it's been a month. There's been so much going on in the world, and also especially in the world where I normally hang out, and that is the online world. As you know, I'm a very early adopter of a lot of social media platforms. I think I've been on Twitter, for instance, since 2007. Every year I get a reminder of the Twitter anniversary. I've been on YouTube since the early days, Facebook. And then, of course, I used to be active on platforms that have completely disappeared. Remember MySpace? Remember all those, oh my gosh. I think I tried out everything. And of course, over time, a number of these platforms started to get replaced by newcomers or new platforms. And some just became bigger and bigger and more influential. Now, of course, I'm not telling you anything new by saying that especially Twitter is in a lot of turmoil right now. Ever since Elon Musk took over, he immediately started implementing a ton of changes, a very, very radical way of restructuring his organization because it's his now. He owns it. He paid, $40 billion for it or something like that. I just cannot. Just does not compute. My brain is too small for numbers like that. But anyway, so he needs to turn a profit. He needs to, he feels he needs to do something quickly to start making money with this new acquisition of his. The problem is it's going so fast, and this platform has been so incredibly influential, not because it's the biggest platform, because it's not. TikTok, way bigger. Facebook, way more powerful. Instagram is bigger than Twitter. But all the important people are on Twitter, especially journalists, politicians, the influencers, especially in our society. I'm not talking about, fashion or makeup influencers. We have a lot of those on other platforms. But it's been a really important platform to follow the news, to get the word out about what's happening in your area of the world. And of course, especially in the more recent years, it has also been a platform with a lot of issues when it comes to content moderation and fake news and troll armies going after people. Very, very difficult space to manage. And the fear is now that with all these very drastic, extremely fast changes, there's going to be not enough control anymore over the situation. This can get out of hand very, very quickly. So I don't know if this will impact each and every Twitter user. I think a lot of people may not be following the developments all that closely. I do because it's part of my job, of course, as someone who works in the media, to keep an eye on the bigger things that are happening to our online world, because that's where I work, so I need to know what's going on. But I do think that we need to also have a plan B, maybe even a plan C, and that is true. You should never just go with one platform. Almost every communications expert says, make sure that you are in control of your own content. Just don't put everything on one platform, because if that platform, for whatever reason, starts to malfunction, they have your content. And so you always need to have, at least make sure you have a wide range of channels to interact with your followers and to get the word out. And I also think that I've seen platforms come and go. And sometimes I went with the new stuff and I tried it out and then it never got anywhere. And sometimes I just hopped over because I saw a lot of other people doing that and there were good reasons to do that. And it turns out I was right. For instance, like with Facebook, and I'm talking about like 10 years ago, there was this huge platform in the Netherlands everybody was on. It was a bit like MySpace, and nobody had heard of Facebook, or at least most people hadn't. But since I was always communicating with an international audience, I was already doing like blogging in English about Star Wars. I had way more interaction with the rest of the world than with people in my own country. I noticed everybody started to flock to Facebook. And so I was like, okay, Facebook is this global, huge entity. If everybody goes there, then there's no way that this relatively small local Dutch initiative is going to survive over time, since the world is growing beyond our national borders. I don't think there's a future for that. And so I moved over to Facebook, and that's where I've been doing a lot of my communication over the years. Now, of course, that Facebook has also changed a lot, and I'm also kind of like moving elsewhere. So I've recently moved to TikTok. It doesn't mean that I leave the other platform, but I focus more on the platforms where most people congregate. And also what I find more and more important is to look at the kind of the overall atmosphere on a platform. And it is sometimes really difficult to discern what is the right place to go. Take, for instance, TikTok. There are two aspects of TikTok. One, super positive. One, extremely worrisome. Positive, it's an amazing community. I've met so many new people. It's a very supportive, creative community as well. I've had more interaction on TikTok than I've had on any other platform. So it's wonderful for that. There's so many creative people that are sharing their knowledge, their experience, their sense of humor, their music with the world. I love it for that. Of course, the other side of TikTok is the fact that it's a Chinese company. And just the other week, they have published some updated terms of service. And that made especially the lawmakers here in Europe extremely worried, because they basically admit that a lot of our data, or even our personal data, is going straight to China, where, of course, free speech is, well, not something that is always condoned. So how safe is that? Does that even comply to the EU regulations when it comes to transfer of data? Our European Union is very strict with that kind of stuff. It's very, very much in favor of protecting the privacy of the European citizens. I also know that in the United States, obviously, people are very worried about this kind of like obtruse, unclear connection between the Chinese government and the company ByteDance that makes TikTok, and then all of its global users. So, do I want to be active there? Yes, because that's where the world is. That's where I can find so many great people, and that's where also my own contribution finds a new audience. But at the same time, I would say it's if something else comes along that is more in line with the values of the country that I live in, then yeah, I'll probably not stay there. But let's make no mistake, this is the case with all these platforms where it's free, yes, but you do pay a price. You yourself are the commodity. You are the product. So they use all your information, your behavior online. They gather that in profiles, and that's a pretty scary aspect of our social media that we are not that aware of. But it is happening, and not just in China. It's happening on every social platform. And so now that Twitter is in such turmoil, I figured, you know what? I've been trying out this new platform called Mastodon a couple of months ago, and I thought it was so complicated, and I didn't get it. And I was like, nah, this is not for me. Plus, it was like crickets there. Like, who uses Mastodon? All my friends are on the big social platforms, so there wasn't really an incentive for me to get to know that platform better. But now there is, because I felt like I want to see if that is a good platform as an alternative to Twitter for the kind of work that I do, for the context that I want to have, for the conversations that I value. And so I went back to my original profile, discovered that it was actually located on a small... So for those of you, let me give you a very brief primer of what Mastodon is. So Mastodon, in a certain way, very similar to Twitter in a sense that it's a micro-blogging platform, which means it's all about small messages. You get a little bit more room for your thoughts. It's about 500 characters versus 288 on Twitter. But all the rest feels very similar. You follow people, you can like, you can not retweet, but repost, or it's called boost. It has its own vocabulary. You don't tweet, but you toot, because a Mastodon, of course, is kind of like elephant-like, mammoth-like creature. But that's where the similarities stop. There are also a lot of differences. The biggest one is that this is not owned by anyone. It's been developed by volunteers. It's open source. Anyone can install an instance, they call it an instance, of the platform on his or her computer or server, which means that it's not just this big company that has thousands and thousands of servers working day and night to send messages back and forth between its users. No, Mastodon is more of a tool that has like small, you could say, worlds, almost like planets, where you can go and you can join that community over there. All the moderation is done by the owners of that particular instance of Mastodon. But It can very well be that, for instance, you have a Mastodon, let's call it a planet. Okay, planet Mastodon art, and it's where all the artists are. And a lot of people that love painting and watercolors and whatnot, knitting, they all want to be on that platform, because if you look at the total feed of people that are posting on that particular server, it's all about creativity, and it's very easy to find friends there. But of course, you also want to be able to communicate with people that are on a different planet, which also runs Mastodon. So how does that work? Well, all these servers, all these planets have linked traffic. They can all communicate with each other, which of course is a little bit slower, because if there are, for instance, tiny little planets and they run on a shared server, which is not very powerful, and all of a sudden they get a lot of new members on that planet, it becomes very crowded and it becomes very slow. And of course, all those slower planets start to influence the whole gravitational situation. I don't think this is a good metaphor, but anyway. So it's not as polished as what we're used to on a platform like Twitter. On the other hand, it's also almost completely invincible. No one owns it. If you don't like this or that particular planet, you just fly to a rock, then you plant your flag, you install Mastodon, and you say, hey, you can always come here. And it's also for a user, it's very cool that you can, for instance, say, I really don't like art. Every time someone posts a picture of an oil painting, I get itchy and I get red dots on my face. So you know what? All these artists, I don't want to see them. And so you can just say, hey, anyone who's on that planet, I don't care for. I don't need to see their updates. I don't want communication there. So you can see the power of that. And it's up to you where you want to be. You can choose your own community. Nobody can boss you around or all of a sudden change the rules. If let's say the moderator of your particular instance says, hey, from now on, we're going to only post about vegetarian food. All the chicken eaters here, all those bratwurst fanatics, we're gonna slow down their growth. We're gonna flag their messages. You say, hey, well, I'll just go to Planet Bratwurst, where they're more lenient with people like me. So it's a really powerful system, and because there is still always communication. For instance, if you want to move from one planet to another, like I was on a Dutch Mastodon server, which was, and still is, managed by just a fellow Dutchman. He's doing that as almost as a hobby in spare time, pays for it for the server himself. But then, because so many people were trying out Mastodon in the Netherlands after what was happening on Twitter, that server just came to a grinding halt, and I was unable to modify my profile. I was like, okay, I think I need to move to another server, which I did. I went to mastodon.online, which kind of looks like the same planet, but it's a totally different planet. It was a little bit bigger, more stable, more powerful computers. And the cool thing is, all my followers, I had 10 followers, so... but they automatically were transferred, were following me along to the other planet. And there are a few more differences, which I think make it an interesting platform to check out. You cannot really do a text search. You can search for hashtags. So it kind of goes back to the original way of sharing stuff. It's I'll just add a hashtag and people look for those hashtags. But on Twitter, of course, you could also just look for any word. And that's how all these bots started to attack people if they would use one word. I've noticed it myself. If I would use, for instance, Pope Francis in a tweet, or I don't know, other words, trigger words, sometimes I would get a whole army of, I don't know if there were real people or bots that started to attack me, and I had to one by one kind of block all these people that were attacking me because I was saying something positive or even neutral about Pope Francis. And it's like, I don't like that. Well, you can't do that on Mastodon. And so it makes it a little bit more bot unfriendly, which I think is good. At least troll bot. I'm not talking about bots that automatically post, for instance, news updates. Another thing is you cannot quote tweet. Quote tweeting was like an evolved version of retweeting. Retweeting is just like, hey, I like this message. Let's share that with my followers, right? But then later on it became quote tweeting, and you can add a little phrase. Like, for instance, look at the nonsense that so-and-so now has posted. And then it included a short, like not screenshot, but a snippet of the original message. So it enabled me as a user to frame someone else's message. And I was no longer talking to that person. I was talking to my followers. Like, look at that person there. Don't you think I'm right? And unfortunately, that has been used a lot in flame wars, in troll attacks. And it created a very hostile environment for some people on Twitter. And so the creator of Mastodon and of the whole, let's say the whole toolkit of Mastodon said, we're not going to do quote tweets. I know it was very popular, but I really don't want to introduce that. I'd rather have people take a little bit more time to maybe even retype some of the comments that they are adding their thoughts to. But what I hope is that that little delay will invite people to have a real conversation with the original author instead of just pointing at others and sometimes even like calling on the troll armies to go attack people. You know what? The proof is in the pudding, of course. And there are lots of other differences, subtle differences, and also things that Twitter can do, or things that Mastodon can do that you can't do on Twitter. For instance, there's an edit button. It's very easy to go back and edit your message. And then what's even cooler is that it will notify people that have liked that original message and will tell them, hey, the author of this message has now changed the message. Do you still like this? So for instance, if I post something on Mastodon, I say like, I love vegetarians. All bratwurst eaters are despicable. And then I get all these like vegan, vegetarian likes and thumbs up and reposts. And then I go and modify my message later on and I say, all these vegetarians are terrible. Bratwurst is the future of the culinary whatever. Just eat more bratwurst. Then all these vegetarians on Twitter are like, hey, that's not the message that I liked. But on Mastodon, they are notified like, hey, this vegetarian promoter has now turned into a bratwurst worshipper. Do you still like this message? It's really very, very well thought out. But the proof is in the pudding, as I said. And so for the past 2 days, I've been setting up camp on Mastodon. I started to just look for hashtags. Who is posting about Star Wars? Who is posting about anime? Who's posting about astronomy? And then you look for a hashtag, and then I get this column full of interesting posts, and then it's like, oh, wow. Oh, my gosh, this guy or this girl, this person, this droid, this Wookiee has such an amazing review of Andor. I need to follow this person. And so that it takes a bit of time because you basically have to start from scratch. You cannot just say, look, everyone who is on Twitter now, I want to follow these people on Mastodon. So you have to actively look for new people to follow. But it's been amazing. There's such a whole new world that opens up for me and interesting conversations. And because everybody's kind of new right now, it's like, okay, so how does this work? There's a lot of people helping each other. It's not just about the tool. But for me right now, what is so attractive about Mastodon is the overall atmosphere. And of course, there are always exceptions. But all in all, I think it's almost like a reboot of what we used to do on Twitter. It feels like we're starting anew. And this time, I think the system is a little bit more protected against like sudden changes or people just you kind of thwarting the original intent of the medium for other goals. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm immediately gone from Twitter. I've announced like, hey, I'm continuing the conversation that I had here on Mastodon, but I'm not going to close down my account, at least not right now. But because I really want to focus on how does this work for me, and I've already been so happy with the new contacts and friendships and conversations. I like to hang out on Mastodon, whereas with Twitter, I was always a bit wary. What's gonna pop up now? And I was always like, there's like the doom scrolling, like, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end. And I have the total opposite feeling on Mastodon. Will it stay like this when the masses start to congregate there? Only time will tell. But I'm always in for new adventure. So if you are after this curious to figure it out yourself, first of all, you take your time. It's not a copy of Twitter. It will maybe at the beginning be a little bit confusing, although there are excellent introduction videos. Every change is difficult, and maybe you are on a server that may be a bit slow from time to time. But give it a little bit of time. For me, it took 2 days, and now I'm like, okay, I think I know how this works, and you start to enjoy it. That's what I hope will also be your experience. If you want to follow me on Mastodon and look me up, just go to any Mastodon server, wherever you fly to, any planet you want to fly, and then just search for Father Roderick. So my official Mastodon address is Father Roderick at mastodon.online. But if you type in Father Roderick, you'll probably find me very quickly. So let me know what and make sure that you say hi because I'm still at 0 right now. I have a very, very small group of people that I interact with on Mastodon. But something tells me that might actually change very rapidly.
How do you not like movies?
They're predictable. Like, the guy gets the girl and that kid sees dead people and Darth Vader is Luke's father.
Not liking movies is like not liking puppies.
They're fine. I just get bored and never make it to the end.
You need a movie education. You need a movication. I'm gonna give it to you.
All right, I'm really enjoying this new, television channel subscription service called Sky Showtime. It's basically Paramount, Paramount Plus, Peacock, Sky, some other stuff. And they just launched, I think they officially launched actually the other day in Amsterdam. They had a big party. And some of the actors, because of course Paramount is also Star Trek, they had a couple of actors from Star Trek who showed up in Amsterdam, and I was like, if only I had known. I would have maybe asked around if there is still room for a geeky priest who likes to talk about television shows and movies. But alas, I was at home and I was following the updates of people that were there. But even though it's still very small, it doesn't even have all Star Trek yet. It does have Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which I reviewed, I think, last week, which is so cool. It's still my favorite Star Trek series right now. But I also started to browse a little bit, and I came across 2 television series that I've started to watch. One is called The Offer, and I was intrigued because the layout of the poster of the television show made me think of The Godfather, which is such an amazing movie. This television show is a fictionalized account of how that first Godfather movie was made. It's a mini-series, so it's not going to be like multiple seasons. Of course, that's impossible because once the movie is made, there's no more story. But it is extremely well done. It takes place in the 70s. I grew up in the 70s. And so a lot of the visual style of the movie, the way people dress, the cars that you see in the streets, it all feels so familiar. It's like, oh my gosh, I had forgotten how much that was the world that I grew up with. I grew up in. Everybody is smoking everywhere. It's like, wow, okay, yes, I remember those days. But it also tells an interesting story. Of course, it's part of it is romanticized, fictionalized, but also they use the information of what was happening when they were developing this script. It gives you a really good insight in how this movie got made and how Hollywood worked in those days. And I think on that level, it is very compelling and realistic. And from what I've been able to judge, what they show of how, how's the interaction between the original script writer, the showrunners, the writers, the bosses of the company, even the glimpses that you get of the actual workings of Hollywood, a lot of that feels very realistic to me as someone who actually has also worked in the broadcasting industry. And of course, all that is not worth much if the actual acting is not good or the story is not compelling. This movie or this miniseries didn't get very high ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's like a 6 out of 10 or something like that. So not everybody liked it. And I have to say, disclaimer, I've only watched one episode so far. So I'm only judging on the basis of this first episode, but I was really mesmerized. I loved the writing. Dialogue is excellent. Acting is fantastic. They've got some really high profile actors in this series. They've got, I will just give you some names: Mike Steller, Matthew Goody, Giovanni Ribisi, Colin Hanks, Dan Fogler. You know him from Fantastic Beasts, Juno Temple, Bern Gorman, and also Lou Ferrigno. You remember him? He was the original, well, not the original, but the 80s Hulk, the bodybuilder who portrayed Bruce Banner in his Hulk form. He's great in this series, and is like, wow, I cannot believe that is the same guy as the Hulk that I watched religiously as a child. Very cool. Both Dan Fogler and Lou Ferrigno are going to be at the Dutch Comic Con, which is happening next weekend, I think, or in 2 weeks. I'll be there. So they're going to speak. They're going to have they will show up, and maybe they'll also talk about this show, although it may not be the right topic for the Comic-Con audience. But it's very cool to be able to see them in real life soon. But yeah, just wanted to give that a thumbs up. I'm not sure if people have access to it. I don't think that many of you are on Sky Showtime. But I just wanted to mention this. If you ever come across it, check it out. And then another thing that I was looking forward to quite a bit was Halo. I've been playing these Halo games ever since the Xbox came out. I loved the first Halo, very atmospheric. I played it years after it was launched, by the way. I'm always a little bit behind on stuff. I loved Halo 2. And then I once played Halo 3 with someone else who actually guided me through the entire campaign, because I am lousy at first-person shooters, as you know. But it was great to have someone else who did all the hard work, and so I was able to experience the whole full story of a video game. And that barely ever happens, because I'm just not a very good player. So I usually rage quit or I give up on games like this, but it was so cool. It felt like I've been in a Halo movie. It was very visceral. It took about 2 days, I think, to work our way through the entire campaign, but it was unforgettable. It was such an amazing experience. So when I saw that they were developing a Halo television series, Steven Spielberg was even involved in the production of it. I was like, wow, yes, I want to see this. When it launched last year, there were a lot of people that were criticizing it because it doesn't really stick to the lore of the video game. It makes a lot of changes. You do see a ton of familiar costumes and even sound effects and settings, but they did change the story. And one of the cool things I think about the video game is you never know who Master Chief is. You never see his face. It's like very much like Boba Fett. never, like what Boba Fett used to be, is this kind of slightly mysterious guy, never takes his helmet off. And what happens in Halo, maybe also because of the conventions of television, let me take off my helmet. And then everybody's like, no, don't do that. Because the cool thing about having someone who never reveals his face is that you can't kind of project anything on it. You can be Master Chief. And once the helmet goes off, you're just like, oh. It's like me with Boba Fett. Okay, yeah. Oh, right. Well, whatever. And then they did the same thing with the Mandalorian, of course. At first, the Mandalorian is kind of this very cool-looking dude with taking care of Baby Yoda, never taking off his helmet. And the moment he takes off his helmet is like, oh, okay. The mystery disappears a bit. I mean, I still think it was a good choice because they actually also used the whole helmet on, helmet off thing in the narrative, because apparently it's a religious thing that you don't take your helmet off. But with Halo, that was definitely something that the fans did not like. I have to say, after watching the first episode, I think, well, yes, I see where they made changes, but I also think that it's a pretty solid series. It looks great. There's a lot of action. It feels at times very much like the video game. But it also develops an interesting story. It's solid sci-fi. And so there's a lot that I like about Halo. And I can't wait to see where they will take this series. I still keep wondering why they felt the need to change the lore so much. It's always a risky thing to change the narrative, because Halo is much more than a video game. For a lot of people like me, we grew up with Halo. It was part of our, well, not childhood in my case, but definitely the time that I was a student, that I was in seminary. Well, maybe a little bit later. It's probably when I was already a priest, but it's marked part of my life. And that's why it has a very emotional charge. And the moment you start messing around with that, it feels like you're messing around with my memories, So I understand why they did it. I also wonder, wouldn't it have been better to just respect the original story? We've got great examples in television and also in anime where they actually do respect the original material very much. Like, for instance, Chainsaw Man, the anime series that I'm currently commenting on TikTok and YouTube. Chainsaw Man is based on a manga, and people were like very worried. Oh my gosh, it's going to be an anime adaptation. They're gonna mess it up, because that often happens. But no. The original creator of the manga was also involved in the creation of the anime series, and he made sure that the anime series is extremely respectful of the original source material. And so everybody who loved the manga and it had a huge following also loves the anime right now. So yeah, why change the story if it upsets your biggest fans and advocates? Anyway, that's what I've been watching recently. And next week, of course, there will be Star Wars to talk about.
Catholics rock!
And it's time for a short visit to the Peculiar Bunch. This is a place where you can ask anything you always wanted to know about Catholics, but you're afraid to ask.
Catholics can be a peculiar bunch. No meat on Friday.
Oh, meat? What do they eat? Light bulbs?
I often get a lot of questions about what Catholics believe, and oftentimes it also shocks me a bit, like, but doesn't everybody knows this? Well, apparently not.
Man, you guys got more crazy rules than Blockbuster Video.
That's one of the things that I like about working on TikTok and on YouTube and these different areas where a lot of people have no idea whatsoever of what a priest is, what the Catholics believe, how it all works. And so they can ask these very open, innocent questions. And I was like, wait, Do I really have to explain this? I mean, I thought it was clear. Well, it's very humbling sometimes to realize how little people know about the Catholic faith, and how much I have been living in this bubble where I feel like, yeah, but this is just common knowledge. Well, it's not. And it just reminds me of how important it is to do something like this, like a segment on a podcast where I answer questions, or what I used to do on my Lego YouTube channel is like make these little explanation videos about, so what is Advent, what is Christmas, what do Catholics celebrate during Pentecost, because there's a lot of confusion about faith. What it entails, how it all also is congruent. How do things click together in Catholic faith? If you only watch the news, first of all, it's very rare that something is explained in the news. It's usually about something going wrong in one of these religions. But even if you Google, you still see a lot of misconceptions and sometimes even deliberately false information. And I may have been myself also guilty of just Googling something and then just believing it right away without really going more in depth. That's why right now on TikTok I follow a lot of people from different religions from mine who explain stuff. And it just sharpens my mind. It helps me to get like an inside perspective. And I think it's super important, especially in these polarized times, that we keep talking with one another, that you stay curious, and that you explain your own. This is something that we are called, as Christians, we are called to do, we to bear witness of our faith, to explain why we believe what we believe, and more importantly, why we do the things that we do, because faith is not just something of the mind. It's also something of the heart and something that needs to express itself. Those are the fruits from which people will judge the tree. So if you say you are a faithful believer, but in your day-to-day choices, there is no difference with other people, and you're just as selfish as anyone else, and you don't help, you don't make this world a better place, then people might judge the tree on the basis of the fruits and saying, well, I don't care for that faith because whatever good has ever come from religion. It's something you see a lot on social media. Is like, religion has only caused war and misery, which of course is maybe understandable if you only have your religious knowledge from the news about scandals and stuff that go, and corruption and whatnot, abuse. But if you know a little bit more about the history of mankind, and unfortunately, history is also something that not many people are studying, and a lot of people have no idea about their own history, about the history of their own cultures in which they live. But from a historical point of view, of course, that is nonsensical. Even like from a scientific point of view, that would be totally illogical and untrue to say that religion has only brought misery in the world and wars. No, just look at history and you'll see that religion has actually also been a source of incredible progress in the world. Even science has been very, very, let's say, promoted by the church. Not always. But for instance, the guy who came up with the whole Big Bang Theory was a priest. So I feel like it's important to know more about your own faith if you're a Christian, but also, and this is known by people that work in education, the best way to learn is to explain it to someone else. And so for me, this segment on the show is always also a way for me to kind of deepen my faith and to rethink stuff that I've been brought up with someone else. It's like the other day, Jan, I think in the Discord, was like, can you explain a little bit more about purgatory? You mentioned that last week, but what's that about? I was like, oh yeah, maybe I should talk about that. But then it's like, okay, so how am I going to explain this? So I need to think about that, and that helps me also to deepen my faith. So curiosity, trying to explain, to bear witness of what you believe is super helpful, both for the receiver and also for the person who explains. Now, we're going to get some great help next year. You may have heard of the very, very successful podcast, The Bible in a Year, where every day you would get a podcast episode, about 15 minutes, and it would comment upon a part of the Bible. And it would be this chronological reading of the Bible from the first page until the last page, with commentary explaining, so why is this happening? How does this relate to other parts of the Bible? How does this apply to your life as well? It wasn't just like an intellectual exercise, it was also trying to make the Bible come alive. It was a massively successful endeavor, very, very well executed as well. Well, the same people that created that Bible in a Year podcast are now going to do the Catechism in a Year podcast. It will start in January. So it's Father Mike and some other people that you may know if you've listened to the Bible podcast that will also be involved in production of the Catechism in a Year. And I'm going to follow that. I'd love to, kind of get a refresher of all this incredible wealth and knowledge and tradition that is contained in the Catechism of the Church. Catechism, of course, is not like the Bible. It's not written by God or anything. The Bible is also not written by God, but inspired by God, written by human beings. But the Catechism does do a valiant effort in condensing the Catholic faith in an easy-to-follow, systematic way. And so I think if you would follow that podcast, at the end of next year, you will probably know more about Catholicism than I know at present. I'm very well aware that as a theologian and a philosopher, there's more that I don't know than stuff that I know, let alone what I'm able to explain. So I'm also, just like you, looking forward to listening to this show. So it's not online yet. I'll include a link in the show notes to an interview with Father Mike and some other people that explain why they do this podcast and what you can expect. But definitely for me, something to look forward to next year.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night. The packet. The extraction theory papers. Am I the only one who did the reading?
Huh. I've done a lot of reading. The most important reason was that this week I was not fully fit. As I explained in my other podcasts, I've had a pretty bad reaction to the COVID booster. I've been sick for a couple of days, and then for some reason I just couldn't get things running again. Every day I was very tired. I went to see the doctor. I got my blood works checked. And the result of that was that actually I'm very healthy. I'm super fit. There's nothing wrong with my blood except for one thing. And it was what I expected. And that's I have a slight vitamin D deficiency. And that is probably one of the reasons that I'm often so tired. So I need to take in a little bit of extra vitamin D. And over time, hopefully my energy will return. But for the past few days, every time I sat down, I was like, okay, I need to do my review of the latest Andor episode, because I love Star Wars Andor, and I want to share my thoughts about every episode. And then I sat down, I started to turn the camera on, and I was like, I'm so tired. I just need to sleep. Just put me in carbonite for another week. And so I instead I just listened to a ton of audiobooks. I was reading a lot of books, and well, one of the boons of that is that I'm almost current now with my Goodreads reading challenge. I only have 3 more books to read this weekend, and then I am on schedule again. Woohoo! So I've read a couple of books. I think I've read about 3 or 4 books this week already. But I want to mention 2 of them. One is a novella almost by Stephen King. It's called You Are, or You're. And it was written when the Amazon Kindle had just come out, and everybody was raving about, oh my gosh, you can just have an entire library on this small, thin device. Now, of course, these first Kindle ebooks were very clunky, very big, and expensive. Not everyone had one. So this story is about a guy who actually buys a Kindle, orders the first Kindle, the white ones, and then he gets the package a few days later, and he opens it, and to his surprise, he's got a pink or purple Kindle. I was like, I've never seen that color before. And then he starts to explore it, downloads some books, and all seems to be, well, he loves the device. And then he sees like there is a tab in the menu, and it says experimental features. And that actually used to be, maybe it still is on the Kindles. You can, for instance, it would have a browser on those early Kindles, and you could connect it to, it was super slow, totally unusable. But anyway, they were experimenting with it. So he also checks out the features under experimental features. The features under experimental features. Yeah. You see, I'm not a writer. I'm not Stephen King. And then he tries out the browser, and then he sees like a book from one of his favorite authors. I think at one point he's even looking for stuff written by Shakespeare. But he doesn't recognize the title, and it's like, how don't I recognize this title? I've read everything of this author. And so he buys the book, he starts to read it, and he's like, yeah, this totally is Shakespeare. But this story is not. He has never written this. And then he finds, he does more searches, and he finds other authors that have, but he finds a whole slew of books that have never actually been written by those authors. And he downloads them, and he starts reading them, and he shares that with other people. And they all agree, like, yeah, this has to be written by that author. It's so clearly his or her voice. But in our reality, they have never written this. And in fact, they discover books that were written after the death of the author, by the author, at least according to that Kindle device. And that's where they start to discover that they are actually downloading books from an alternate dimension. And then it gets very Stephen King-like. Then, of course, if you can peek into other realities through this device, maybe we can also look into the future. And that's where, of course, things start to become creepy, and things are starting to get out of hand. I won't spoil what happens next. You'll have to check it out for yourself. But it's really masterfully written. When I first saw the description of this book, I was like, how can you write a story about a guy who buys a Kindle? And then you're at like chapter 3, you're like, oh yeah, Stephen King can. It is really, really cool. So that was a fun read. And these books read themselves, I just, usually especially when I have to read a number of books, I always look at like, how much time is this going to take me to read this book? And sometimes I really have to work, and it was like, okay, I got 300 more pages to read. Okay, I'm going to force myself to read at least 100 pages in the next hour. And then I was like, I'm really working to get through the book. Not with Stephen King. I totally forget time and space. I was like, I'm in the story, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Another book that was very enjoyable is written by Kunal Nayyar. I'm not sure if that name rings a bell, but if I say Raj from The Big Bang Theory, you're like, oh, yes, Raj Kutrapali. So the actor, Kunal Nayyar, who is from India, who plays Raj on The Big Bang Theory, wrote a book when he was still, I think, filming season 3 or 4 of The Big Bang Theory. So this is not like looking back on his career as one of the main cast members of that show. But he was already super well known and, made a lot of heads move with his role. And he wrote a book called Yes, My Accent is Real, and some other things I haven't told you. I totally expected this book to be a book full of memoirs and behind-the-scenes anecdotes of The Big Bang Theory, and I love The Big Bang Theory, so that's what motivated me to read the book. And it was nothing like that. There was hardly any mention of The Big Bang Theory, but it is I think a fun book to read about how he grew up, his Indian culture, background, his family. He moved overseas, started an internship, and so he tells about his first steps in the world of acting and how he ended up, becoming this very well-known actor. Talks about his marriage. And what I loved about the book is that it is very much the same tone of voice and the same humor that you see in Raj Kutrapali, which then opened my eyes that, the writers of The Big Bang Theory have actually started to write for the actor, and a lot of the actor's character and mannerisms and humor is integrated in the show, which almost makes it feel like you're actually reading a biography of Raj Kutrapali, which is not the case, but it is the same humor. It's the same. I was laughing so much when I was reading this book. So it was very, very funny. And now I want him to write another book, but this time write it about The Big Bang Theory. There is this one book, and unfortunately it's not available on my Storytel account. That is a behind-the-scenes book about The Big Bang Theory. And I'm waiting for it to go on sale on the Kindle store because I just love anything that has to do with The Big Bang Theory. And I love reading books about how a show gets made, to get the other side of the story as you want, if you will. And so a friend of mine actually posted an update on Goodreads that he was reading that book. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need to read that book as well. So I don't know if I can hold out until it goes on sale. Maybe I'll just buy it as it is. Maybe I'll even order it from the US as a book, as a paper book, because I'm not sure if I can wait. I love these kind of books. That's what I wanted to share with you. Let's dive into the kitchen real quick. Currently my fridge is full of vegetables. Oh my gosh. Like half of the fridge is veggies now. This is because I was having this, perceived vitamin D deficiency. I was like, well, maybe there's more going on. I need to be as healthy as possible. So I started to cook even healthier than I was already doing. And it's a lot of fun to try to come up with all these new recipes. I love the stuff that you can do with oatmeal and with lentils. And oh my God, I'm just like, my kitchen is right now feels like Dr. Frink's laboratory. Yes, I'm trying out all these recipes. The crazy professor from The Simpsons. It's a lot of fun. I love cooking, but I'm also trying out some new stuff. For instance, that in the Netherlands we have a lot of cows, right? If you've ever seen a postcard of the Netherlands, it always shows the windmills and then these green plains full of grass and cows. Cows and tulips. We grew up with that. We always thought, well, thank God the Netherlands is such a natural environment with so many cows. And then I watched this documentary about okay, but is this actually good for our environment that we have so many cows, that all our agricultural economy is focused on the production of dairy and meat? And then you discover that actually there is a dark side of this whole industry around cows, where cows are bred systematically so they either will give a ton of milk. Of course, the female cows, not the bulls. The bulls are just raised as quickly as possible so they can go into the meat grinder. And of course, for a cow to be able to give milk, she will have to have a calf every year. the moment the calf is born, they take it away from the mother, which is very stressful for the cow, but then she will continue to give milk. The cows that actually produce the milk will die much, much quicker. They will have a very short lifespan compared to cows that are not used for milk production. And so when I was reading all that, and plus the grass that you see in the Netherlands, on every single photo of the Netherlands, there's so much grass. This grass doesn't even come from the Netherlands. It's like specifically optimized grass that can withstand any type of weather. It's very resistant against bugs and whatnot. But it replaced the kind of natural meadows that we used to have, even when we were already having this big dairy industry in the Netherlands. We used to have meadows where all sorts of different types of grass and plants would grow, and cows would eat whatever grew there. But of course, for insects, for butterflies, bees, even for birds, those natural meadows were so much better for our environment. Whereas now with this very tough, almost like over modified type of grass, we've created a monoculture that is causing a lot of issues right now, not just where there is grass and where there are cows, but also in the rest of the Netherlands. So we are currently trying to change that. There is this big agricultural university here in Wageningen, next door to where I live, where they do a ton of research on trying to find ways that will actually be helpful for the industry, but also will improve the overall balance in our environment. And so I was like, okay, I don't actually need dairy to be healthy, right? This is scientifically proven because like half of mankind is actually lactose intolerant. They never use dairy and they're still very healthy. So you don't need dairy. You can also, but you do need a balanced diet. You do need your protein. You do need your calcium, etc. So I was reading up on stuff that I could do, which would have a bit of a lesser footprint. And one of the ways in which you can improve the situation was, well, switch from dairy to soy milk. Now, soy, of course, is not climate neutral. And you've all heard the stories about these big, forests that are cut down in Brazil and in other parts of South America for soy crops. But what we don't often realize is that most of the soy is used to feed animals. So we can then use the dairy from the animals and eat the meat of these animals. Well, so it stills, and a lot of the soy milk in the Netherlands is done with soy that grows on Dutch ground here in our country. We're not importing that from other countries. And so I was like, okay, well, let's give it a try. So I switched to soy milk, which it takes a bit of getting used to. It definitely, like a soy milk frappuccino, it's not the same. It's not the same. So it isn't. But for instance, if you use like dairy in cooking or in desserts, no problem whatsoever. My porridge in the morning, the oatmeal with soy milk, not an issue. It's just that in the coffee, it's not what I'm used to, but maybe I'll get used to that as well. Or maybe not. I'll just drink my coffee black. Anyway, this is how I'm constantly experimenting with stuff and seeing how I can cook in a healthy way. And at the same time, I want to be also more aware of how my behavior, my consumer choices can actually help make my country healthier again and help to repair the damage that we've done to our environment by this high intensity, farming industry. Another thing that is related to this is something I saw in the news yesterday, literally. And it was actually an appeal to the Dutch bishops to follow their UK colleagues by reinstating the Friday abstention. So that on Friday, in a lot of countries, Catholics are not allowed to eat meat. This is not dogma. And in the 80s of the previous century, the bishops back then decided that Catholics in the Netherlands are allowed to substitute this fasting on meat, so this abstinence, with another way of fasting. And that could, for instance, be, well, I'm just not going to eat cookies, or I'm going to give something to the poor, or whatever. You could basically choose any penance of your liking, which of course had the immediate result that all Catholics were like, okay, so now we can eat meat on Friday, so we shall eat meat on Friday. And what was that other thing that the bishop said? Yeah, let's not do other forms of mortification. So basically the result was total dilution of the original idea of that Friday. Friday is in tradition, in Catholic tradition, the day that you remember the sacrifice that Christ made by carrying his cross and dying. And you would kind of join that sacrifice by making a small sacrifice yourself. But all of that has completely evaporated, at least in the Catholic mindset in my country. And so now there was this proposition. Well, maybe we should just go back to that. Maybe the bishop should just tell us to not eat meat on Friday. And they actually did a calculation. If all the Catholics, of course, all the Catholics, how many of those Catholics are actually practicing their faith? I don't know. But just if you look at a couple of million Catholics that we have in our country, if they would all skip meat one time per week, that would have a massive positive impact on the environment. So I doubt it that our bishops are going to do that. And if they would do it, I think a lot of people would revolt, because recent sociological research has shown that Christians actually, in the Netherlands at least, are indistinguishable from their pagan counterparts. They don't make different choices. They eat just as much meat. They are just as much worried about the future of our world and our environment as anyone else. So I doubt that many Catholics would actually change their behavior. But I do believe that as a church, sometimes it might be worth daring a little bit more, being a little bit more prophetic. It does change people if you keep saying, well, hey, we as Catholics, we cannot enforce it, of course. You're not going to be excommunicated for eating bratwurst on Friday. But as the Catholic Church in the Netherlands, we would highly admonish you, motivate you to try to go without meat, if only one day per week, and why not do Friday, I think over time, all these little signals do help people to reflect upon their own behavior, become more aware of how all these individual choices that are very small, how can I change the world? But if we all make small changes for the better, it will have an impact. And we have already seen how all these micro choices that people make and changing their small habits are helping the world to improve. Anyway, I doubt that any of these bishops is listening to this podcast. But hey, you don't have to wait for the bishops to do what's good for the world, right?
We are on the cutting edge of technology.
Wow. Well, what does that mean?
Let's plug it in. It's going to say, hey, I see you plugged in a new device. And it's going to load in the appropriate drivers. You'll notice that this scanner build... Whoa.
Well, all your technology stuff, it just ends in disaster.
But there is one more thing.
So I've been thinking about maybe upgrading my computer to be able to play more recent video games. As you know, I love video games. I don't have that much time for gaming, but I do like my session of Valheim every once in a while, just hanging around in the Viking afterlife building houses, because apparently that's what Vikings do when they die. But the problem is my computer was not built for video games. It was built for editing television programs. And I've been using that for a couple of years to do exactly that. But now I've switched to the Mac for editing, and it's so much better for everything because it's silent. It's it's super blazingly fast when it comes to video editing. So I now have relegated that old computer to the hobby room, and every once in a while I turn it on. I go online and I hang around and I play video games. But I've noticed recently that the computer is struggling. Because it's not a very good graphics card. It's like 4 or 5 years old now, and the whole computer uses a ton of energy. It's very, very because I'm measuring the electricity use, and I can tell if I've played a couple of hours online, the next morning I can tell that it has cost me. And now with these rising energy prices, I'm looking for an alternative. And the first thing I came up with was, maybe I can optimize the current PC. I do have an even older PC, and I've gutted it. So I've only got the Cooler Master PC, framework, the box left. And the Cooler Master is pretty good, and it's still compatible with the motherboard that is in the slightly newer computer. But then I was like, it's going to be such a hassle to take that computer apart and put the innards in the other box. I don't know if I can pull that off. And then if it fails, I cannot play video games anymore. So I was like, what do I do? And so basically I've now, in my bedroom, there's a small desk, and it's completely covered with the old innards of the computer that I no longer use. And then the other computer is still making a ton of noise. Sounds like Cape Canaveral when they're launching a new rocket every time I try to play a video game. So of course I can get a new computer altogether, but I'm thinking, you know what? My priority right now is not video games. My priority right now is to get my hands finally on an iPhone 14 Pro, which are extremely hard to get still, especially the modified versions with a bit more memory. They are still very, very hard to get. And I think Apple has even warned that it may get worse during the holidays. So that's my first priority. And I don't feel comfortable spending so much money on a computer that's just for video games. So I was thinking, what about the Steam Deck? The Steam Deck is something that Valve, the owners of the Steam platform, have built, and you could say it's what the Nintendo Switch is for Nintendo games, but then for people that have a big catalog on Steam. It doesn't play all the games; it runs on Linux, which is kind of interesting. So it runs about half of the games that I have in my catalog, but it does play a number of very important games. Like, for instance, it does play Valheim. It does play the Spider-Man game. So even like AAA games, they play pretty well on the Steam Deck. But it's a smaller screen. You can just sit anywhere and just there are built-in controllers. And I kind of like that concept that I can just, instead of having this huge, chunky, slow computer that gets very hot whenever you play a game because of the horsepower that is needed, to just be able to play on a mobile device. And then there is also a dock, so you can still play on the big screen if you want to, using an external controller. I can just hook it up here to the monitor that I have in the studio and play game. Now, of course, the resolution is not going to be a 4K because it's optimized for 720p, not even for 1080p. But I tend to be not that critical when it comes to resolution when I play video games. It's more about, does it have a good frame rate? I'm playing a lot of games in the cloud right now, and then of course it's sometimes very blurry, and I still manage to enjoy that. So maybe the Steam Deck is the way to go. It is super affordable. I think it's the cheapest one, and you don't need all the memory because you can just put in an SD card. The cheapest model is about $400, and includes everything. It's got a screen. It's got, the controllers. It's got everything. And I already have all the games. I've got hundreds of games in my Steam catalog that I can instantly play on the Steam Deck. So, yeah, I'm actually... And then for the occasional game that won't run, I will still have that old clunky computer sitting in the corner of the hobby room. I can still use it. I don't have to completely rebuild it. But I think the majority of the games that I enjoy right now, I could just play them on the Steam Deck. So maybe that's what I'm going to do. If there's any one of you who actually has experiences with the Steam Deck, I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's time to wrap up the show with the quote of the week. And this time, it's a quote from Paulo Coelho, who wrote the Alchemist must-read book. And this is the quote. One day you will wake up and there won't be any more time to do the things you've always wanted to do. Do it now. It's a very good reminder of memento mori, the fact that we have to remind ourselves that we will all die one day. So the art of living is the art of using your time well. And don't push to tomorrow what you can do today. And don't forget to enjoy life every once in a while, because life is a gift. And God doesn't only want you to work. He also wants you to just enjoy the gift, unpack it, and be thankful. That's what I would recommend you do. And that's what I'm planning on doing this next week. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Thanks to all of you who are watching me record this in the chat room. If you want to catch me live, make sure to follow my YouTube channel. And, well, maybe one of these days I'll see you around on Mastodon. Take care, and God bless. All right. Some people were complaining that a while ago I was recording these short episodes. It was only 45 minutes. It's too short. You get an extra 15 minutes every week now. I'm just too wordy. Hey, thanks for all your comments in the chat. As always, I kind of lose track of what people are saying when I'm live. But that's why I always stick around a little bit. So let me look up the chat here on the... I'm just too wordy. Hey, this is... for all your comments in the chat, as always. This is my past self. How can I turn off the audio here? I'll just turn it off on the iPad. Okay, so can I change the size, the font size of this? Maybe not. No, I can't. Okay. Why is everything so small on this iPad? Oh, Liz, you only had your vaccination 2.5 hours ago. Yeah, for me it took 12 hours for the fireworks to start. I hope you'll be fine. And you also got the flu. The flu vaccination. I hope you're going to be fine. Otherwise, Michiel, you know where the food is, right? One of the major problems with social media is the echo chambers they create. And that is a huge problem, and definitely was also one of the issues that Twitter users were struggling with. That's what I like about at least for now, what I like about the Mastodon experience is I just discover all these new people, and it's because you can follow everything that's posted on your instance of Mastodon, and I often go there just to see what people are talking about and posting about, and I love the way that it kind of expands my horizon. It's also one of the major reasons for me to be on TikTok, because the discovery helps me to constantly challenge my own little bubble that I'm in. But it all on TikTok, on YouTube, it all depends on the algorithm. Even on TikTok, on Twitter, The algorithm is much more influential than we actually realize. And that's the big difference with Mastodon. There is no algorithm. I like it so far. Let's see what else have we got. We got Margot is there. Light bulbs. Are you already that desperate, Michiel? Guys say... What is this? Oh, this is Polish, right? Żebrażenie krzyż brzmi w Trzcinie. Wciąż brzmi w Trzcinie. Yeah, I know what you're referring to. It's like the hardest thing to say in Polish. I can say the last part. Wciąż brzmi w Trzcinie. Okay, you can now give me your grade. Hey, Father, have you been keeping up with Andor? Yes, it is so good. I'm so happy that it's 12 episodes. It's so much better than... Everybody's doing 8 episodes now. It's too short. Like Rings of Power, 8 episodes. Come on. We need at least 12. But I'm still going to be so sad when Andor is over. It's going to take more than a year before we see what happens next. They haven't even started producing Andor right now. My understanding is that the character Raj was originally intended to be Indian American. So to an extent, Raj was based on Kunal from the moment he was cast in the role. Yes. Raised as quickly as possible means slaughtered as babies for the veal market. That's true too. Yeah, it's actually very weird if you think of it, that we are drinking milk that was actually, from a natural point of view, meant for the calves that don't get that milk. It's really messed up. Imperial Advisor, hello there. So good to see you well. I was a member of your forums in the 1990s before the prequels came out. Yes. Oh, those were the days of the virtual edition and the force.net. Sometimes I really miss those days. And sometimes I'm thinking, back then we couldn't imagine how big Star Wars would be 30 years from that moment on. Like 1990s. We thought the prequels was the future of Star Wars. Now it's the ancient past of Star Wars. It's a good time. It's a good moment in history to be alive as a Star Wars fan. UK Catholics are still required not to eat meat on Fridays, and so are most Americans and a lot of other countries. Yeah. I think it would be prophetic to bring back the abstinence on Friday. I'm just not sure that the bishops that we currently have in the Netherlands are interested in that kind of action. Seems to have their hands full on other stuff. Michiel feels called out. What, for your strange tastes of light bulbs? Or for the food that is in the fridge there? Liz, next time, just say nothing. Just sit back and watch what happens. If there's no more food in the fridge, there are no hard-boiled eggs and salad and what was that other thing that you made, like the soup and just see what happens. That's probably why you cooked in advance, right? It's to prevent Michiel from getting takeout for 7 days in a row. I'll stop now. I don't want to spoil the relationship. Hey, I'm going to take a short break. Thank you so much for hopping over. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'm going to see if I can record some Star Wars commentary or maybe some anime stuff next. I cannot promise when that is, but let's first take a break. All right. Bye now.